What if I told you that your noble attempts to rescue others might be the very thing keeping them trapped? You see, we've been taught that compassion means saving everyone we can from their pain. But here's the thing. Some people cling to their suffering like a treasured possession, polishing it daily, wearing it like a badge of honor. Their pain has become their identity. Think about it. When you rush to save someone who secretly cherishes their wounds, aren't you actually disrupting a peculiar form of harmony they've created? Let me tell you something that might seem paradoxical. Sometimes true wisdom lies in knowing when to step back and allow others their chosen journey, however painful it appears to you. We live in a culture obsessed with saving others. We glorify the hero, the rescuer, the one who swoops in to alleviate pain. Our stories, our movies, our very mythology revolves around this narrative. Save the princess. Save the world. Save the suffering soul. The good person is always the one who helps others escape their troubles. You see, we've been taught that goodness equals intervention, that love means never allowing someone to hurt, that compassion requires action. But what if this entire framework is fundamentally misguided? What if our desperate attempts to save others are sometimes not only unnecessary, but actively harmful? Think about it. Have you ever watched a child attempting to help a butterfly emerge from its chrysalis? With gentle, well-meaning fingers, the child carefully breaks open the casing, thinking they're being kind. But the butterfly that emerges is weak, its wings malformed, unable to fly. That struggle, that pushing against resistance, is precisely what strengthens the butterfly enough for flight. The apparent kindness becomes the deepest form of cruelty. Now, I'm not saying we should never help anyone. That would be absurd. But here's the thing about human suffering that we rarely acknowledge. Sometimes it is actively chosen, consciously or unconsciously. Sometimes it serves a purpose we cannot see. I knew a man once, a brilliant mind, truly exceptional talents. Yet year after year, he would make the same self-destructive choices, relationships with the same toxic pattern, career moves that inevitably led to failure, financial decisions that guaranteed hardship. Those around him offered help endlessly. Advice, connections, resources, emotional support. They tried everything. And do you know what happened? He would accept their help momentarily, then sabotage it completely, returning to his familiar pattern of suffering. For years I watched this cycle, puzzled by it, until one day I realized his suffering was not a problem he was trying to solve. It was a solution to a deeper problem none of us could see. His pain was serving him in ways invisible to outsiders. His misery was not a mistake. It was a strategy. You see, for some people, suffering becomes a form of identity. They cling to it. They define themselves by it. They would be lost without it. Imagine for a moment that you've spent decades being the person who struggles, the one who's had it harder than everyone else, the eternal victim of circumstance. Who would you be without that story? What would fill the vacuum if that narrative suddenly disappeared? But here's the thing that's even harder to accept. For many, suffering is not just identity, but comfort. Familiar pain is more comforting than unfamiliar joy. The certainty of known suffering feels safer than the uncertainty of potential happiness. They have built their homes in their hardships. They know where all the furniture is placed in the dark. Think about it. How often have you tried to help someone who seemed to resist the very thing they claimed to want? How many times have you extended your hand only to watch them turn away, then continue lamenting their circumstances? This is the great paradox of human suffering. We may complain about it while simultaneously clutching it to our chests like a precious heirloom. What if their suffering serves a purpose you cannot see? What if your rescue attempts are actually a form of violence? A violation of their chosen path, however unconscious that choice might be. When we rush to save others, we often do so not from a place of wisdom, but from our own discomfort. We cannot bear to witness suffering. It disturbs our peace, challenges our worldview, reminds us of our own vulnerability. So we intervene, believing ourselves virtuous, never questioning whether our help is actually wanted or needed. Our apparent altruism disguises a deeper selfishness. Our rescue attempts become a form of control. You see, there's something profoundly disrespectful in the assumption that we know better than others what they need. There's a kind of arrogance in believing we can or should save people from themselves. It presupposes that we understand the full complexity of their journey, that we can see all ends, that we possess wisdom they do not. But here's the thing about wisdom. True wisdom recognizes its own limitations. It understands that each human life is a vast, complex system with patterns and purposes beyond our comprehension. It honors the autonomy of others, even when their choices appear self-destructive. It knows when to act and when to refrain from action. Think about it. How would you feel if someone tried to save you from an experience that, though painful, was teaching you something essential? Would you thank them for the interruption of your growth? Or would you resent their presumption that they knew what was best for your life? What if I told you that sometimes the most compassionate thing you can do is nothing at all? That sometimes wisdom lies in bearing witness without intervention? That sometimes love means allowing others the dignity of their own journey, even when that journey passes through darkness? Now, to understand why we must sometimes step back, we need to understand the different ways people become entangled with their suffering. We need to recognize the patterns, the types, the varying relationships humans form with their pain. For not all suffering is the same, and not all who suffer are seeking the same thing from their hardship. Now let me tell you something important about this peculiar relationship between humans and their pain. There are 4 types of people who develop a relationship with suffering that they're unwilling to relinquish. 4 distinct ways that humans come to not merely endure their pain, but in a strange and often unconscious way, to cherish it, to protect it, to cultivate it like a gardener tends a thorny but precious plant. The first type is what we might call the identity-bound sufferer. For this person, suffering has become so deeply interwoven with their sense of self that the two can no longer be separated. Their pain is not something that happens to them. It is who they are. You see, we humans construct our identities from the raw materials of our experiences. We build narrative homes from the events of our lives. And strangely, painful experiences often become the foundational stones of these structures. The illness becomes the central character in their life story. The trauma becomes the defining moment. The hardship becomes the lens through which all other experiences are filtered. I once knew a woman who had developed a chronic illness in her 30s. A difficult condition, certainly, but one that many learn to manage while building full lives. But for her, the illness gradually consumed every aspect of her identity. Her conversations inevitably turned to her symptoms. Her relationships existed primarily to provide care and sympathy. Her future plans were entirely contingent on her condition. The illness was no longer something she had. It was something she was. Think about it. If you have spent decades being the sick one, the wounded one, the struggling one, who would you be without that narrative? There would be a void where that identity once stood. and nature abhors a vacuum, especially in the realm of identity. Better the devil you know than the terrifying emptiness of not knowing who you are. And so they hold tightly to their suffering, not because they enjoy the pain itself, but because they cannot imagine themselves without it. Their suffering has become the backbone of their self-concept, the framework that gives structure to their existence. To relinquish it would be a form of death, a dissolving of the self they have so carefully constructed. The second type we encounter is the martyr. You know this person well. Their suffering is their moral currency. Their pain is proof of their goodness, their sacrifice, their superiority. You see, martyrs have discovered something quite ingenious, though they would never consciously admit it. They have found that suffering grants them a special kind of power, moral authority, the right to judge, the right to demand, the right to control. But here's the thing about martyrs. Their suffering gives them the very power they claim not to seek. Their sacrifice becomes a pedestal from which they look down upon others. Their pain becomes the measuring stick against which all other experiences are judged and found wanting. Imagine what happens when you try to help a martyr, when you attempt to alleviate their suffering or lighten their load. Do they welcome it? Rarely. Because your help threatens the very foundation of their moral authority. If they are no longer suffering, no longer sacrificing, no longer carrying burdens alone, what claim do they have to superiority? What right to the moral high ground? Now, I'm not saying these people are consciously manipulative. That would be a grave misunderstanding. The martyr believes their own story completely. They genuinely see themselves as the selfless one, the giver, the one who sacrifices while others indulge. Their relationship with suffering is sincere, if profoundly misguided. The third type is the comfort zoner. This person has made peace with their pain. They have settled into their suffering like an old armchair, worn and tattered, but perfectly molded to their form. You see, humans are creatures of habit and familiarity. We develop routines and patterns that, regardless of whether they bring us joy or pain, become comfortable simply because they are known. The devil you know, as the saying goes. Think of a prisoner who has spent decades in a small cell. Upon release, the vastness of the world is not liberating, but terrifying. The endless choices are not freedom, but paralyzing. Some would rather return to the prison than face the vertigo of possibility. Some would rather the hell they know than the heaven they don't. The familiar suffering feels safer than unfamiliar joy. There is comfort in the predictability of pain. There is security in knowing exactly how things will go wrong. I sometimes wonder what goes through the mind of such a person when offered a path out of suffering. Perhaps something like this. Who would I be in a different life? What would be expected of me if I were not struggling? What new ways might I fail if I stepped out of this familiar pattern? At least in my suffering, I know the rules. I know what to expect. I know how to survive. The fourth and final type is the attention harvester. This person has learned, often from earliest childhood, that suffering is the most reliable way to receive care, attention, and connection from others. They suffer, they share, they receive. This is the cycle, the pattern, the reliable formula they have discovered for meeting their deepest human needs. You see, we all need connection. We all need to be seen. We all need care and attention and love. These are not luxuries, but necessities for the human spirit. And in an ideal world, we would receive these freely, abundantly, without condition. But many do not experience such unconditional love and attention. Instead, they learn that they must earn it. And suffering becomes their currency. Pain becomes their purchase price for human connection. Let me tell you something about these attention harvesters. Their method is fundamentally sound in a tragic way. It works. Display your wounds, and the world will respond. Reveal your suffering, and doors will open. This is not manipulation in the way we typically use that word. It is adaptation to a reality where their genuine self seems insufficient to merit care. And so a pattern develops. A problem arises or is created. The suffering is displayed. Care and attention flow in. The problem mysteriously persists or is replaced by a new one. The cycle continues. Now, I'm not saying we should condemn these people. That would miss the point entirely. Their true need, authentic connection, is entirely valid. It is their method that has become distorted. They have found a path to meeting a legitimate need, albeit a path with terrible costs. Think about it. How might your relationship to suffering change if you believed, deep in your bones, that you were worthy of love and attention simply for existing? If you trusted that connection did not require the currency of pain? You see, in each of these types, there is a logic at work, a coherence, a reason. These are not simply pathologies to be cured or errors to be corrected. They are adaptations, strategies, solutions to problems we may not fully perceive. And this is precisely why rushing to save such people from their suffering can be not only futile, but harmful. You are not merely removing pain. You are dismantling a system, a structure, an architecture of meaning and function. I know what you're thinking. This all sounds rather cold, doesn't it? Leaving people to suffer when we might help them. Standing by while others struggle. Withholding our assistance when we see pain. It seems to contradict everything we've been taught about compassion and kindness and basic human decency. But here's the thing about true wisdom. It often appears cold or heartless at first glance. It often contradicts our most cherished assumptions. It frequently challenges our moral certainties. And nowhere is this more evident than in the ancient Taoist concept of Wu Wei. Wu Wei is typically translated as non-action or non-doing. But this translation misses the subtlety of the concept. It is not about doing nothing. It is about not interfering with the natural unfolding of things. It is about recognizing the profound wisdom inherent in allowing processes to develop according to their own nature. Think about a river flowing toward the sea. It does not need your help to find its course. It does not require your intervention to reach its destination. In fact, your attempts to redirect it often lead to flooding, erosion, damage. The river knows where it is going. It has its own intelligence, its own wisdom, its own rightness. Or consider a plant growing toward the light. It does not need your instructions on which way to turn. It does not require your intervention to find the sun. It knows. There is an innate wisdom in its cells, a natural intelligence that guides it unerringly toward what it needs. You see, there is a natural intelligence at work in all things, including human suffering. There is a purpose, a direction, a wisdom in the unfolding of each life, even when that unfolding passes through darkness and pain. What if I told you that sometimes the most compassionate act is to allow suffering to complete its work? That sometimes the kindest thing we can do is to step back and allow a process to unfold according to its own wisdom, its own timing, its own purpose. I once knew a teacher, a true master of his craft. A young student came to him desperate to learn, but the teacher turned him away. Not once, but many times. The student pleaded, begged, offered money, offered service, Still, the teacher refused. This continued for months until one day, the teacher finally accepted him as a student. Years later, someone asked the teacher why he had been so cruel, so withholding. The teacher smiled and said, "He wasn't ready. His desperation was not yet complete. His suffering had not yet broken open the shell of his ego. Had I accepted him sooner, he would have learned techniques, but not wisdom. He would have gained knowledge, but not transformation. His suffering was doing necessary work that I could not do for him. This is the spiritual dimension of allowing others their journey. This is the sacred wisdom of non-interference. This recognition that suffering itself may be the teacher, the catalyst, the awakener. That pain may be doing work we cannot see, work that is necessary, work that is ultimately healing. Think about it. When you rush to alleviate someone else's pain, what are you assuming? That you know better than they what they need. That you understand the purpose of their suffering better than they do. That your wisdom exceeds the wisdom of life itself, which has brought this person to this moment of pain. Is that not the height of arrogance? Is that not a form of violence, however well-intentioned? This imposition of your will, your timeline, your understanding upon another's journey, their path, their pace, their awakening. You see, life is not a problem to be solved. It is a mystery to be lived. Each life unfolds according to patterns and purposes far beyond our limited understanding. Each suffering has its season, its reason, its hidden wisdom. But here's the thing that makes this teaching so difficult for us to accept. We have been trained to see suffering as only negative, as only destructive, as only wrong. We have not been taught to see how suffering shapes us, forms us, sometimes even serves us. Think of how muscles grow stronger, not through comfort, but through the controlled damage of resistance. Think of how immune systems develop, not through protection, but through measured exposure to disease. Think of how wisdom grows, not through easy answers, but through grappling with difficult questions. Some kinds of growth can only occur through a certain kind of suffering. Some transformations require the heat of pain to catalyze change. Some awakenings demand the alarm bell of crisis to break through our slumber. I'm not glorifying suffering. I'm not suggesting we should seek it out or inflict it on others. But what if I told you that rushing to eliminate all suffering might be as misguided as a parent doing all their child's homework? The ease you provide in the moment creates weakness in the long term. The struggle you prevent also prevents the strength that would have developed through that struggle. Life is a vast symphony. Every note has its place, even the discordant ones. Even the moments of tension, of dissonance, serve the larger composition. Who are we to insist that only pleasant harmonies be played? Who are we to demand that the composer rewrite the score to eliminate all minor keys? You see, the wisdom traditions of the East have long recognized what our comfort-obsessed culture has forgotten: that life includes suffering by design, not by mistake. That pain has purpose. That discomfort is often the precursor to growth. The Buddha did not teach that we should eliminate all suffering. He taught that we should understand its causes, its nature, its place in the larger pattern of existence. He taught that much of our suffering comes precisely from our resistance to suffering, our demand that life be other than it is. Think about this. When you are in pain and someone rushes in to fix it, to solve it, to make it go away, how does that affect your relationship to your own experience? Does it empower you to face your suffering with courage and wisdom? Or does it teach you that suffering is intolerable, that you are incapable of bearing it, that you need rescue? What message are we sending when we frantically try to save others from their pain? That they are not strong enough, that suffering serves no purpose, that discomfort must be eliminated at all costs. Is this truly wisdom? Is this truly compassion? Now, I'm not saying we should never help. That would be an absurd misinterpretation. But wisdom lies in discerning when help serves growth and when it impedes it. When support empowers and when it creates dependency. When intervention honors the other's journey and when it imposes our own agenda. You see, true compassion is not sentimental. It is not always soft and yielding. Sometimes it is firm. Sometimes it steps back. Sometimes it allows natural consequences to unfold. Sometimes it honors suffering's place in the larger process of growth and awakening. Think of it this way. When we rush to save others from their suffering, we are acting like gardeners who cannot bear to see seeds struggle to break through the soil. Our impatience, our discomfort with the process, leads us to dig up the seeds, to break open the casings, to do the work that the seedling must do for itself if it is to grow strong. Life has its own timing, its own wisdom, its own way. The Tao, the ancients called it. The natural unfolding that needs no interference, no correction, no improvement from our limited perspective. Their path, their pace, their awakening. What if I told you that your attempts to save others might be more about your discomfort than their need? That your rush to alleviate pain might be about your inability to bear witness to suffering rather than their inability to endure it? Now you might be wondering, what does this mean in practice? How do we discern when to help and when to step back? How do we know when our assistance serves growth and when it impedes it? How do we navigate this paradox of compassion that sometimes acts and sometimes refrains from action? These are not simple questions. They do not yield to easy formulas or rigid rules. They require something much more demanding: presence, attention, discernment. But I can offer you 3 questions to contemplate before rushing to save someone from their suffering. First, is this person seeking growth or comfort? This is perhaps the most fundamental distinction. Some people in pain are genuinely seeking transformation. They want to understand their suffering, to learn from it, to use it as a catalyst for change. Others simply want relief. They want the pain to stop. They want comfort, not growth. You see, there is nothing wrong with seeking comfort. We all need soothing at times. We all need rest and relief and care. But wisdom lies in discerning what is actually being sought in any given moment. Is this a time for challenge or for comfort? For growth or for healing? For pushing through resistance or for gentle holding? Think about it. When a child falls while learning to walk, sometimes they need a comforting embrace, and sometimes they need encouragement to try again. The wise parent discerns which is needed in each moment, not by rigid rules, but by deep attention to the child before them. The second question to ask yourself: am I acting from love or from my own discomfort with their pain? This requires brutal honesty with yourself. Are you truly acting in service of the other? Or are you attempting to alleviate your own distress at witnessing suffering? You see, we humans have a very low tolerance for witnessing pain in others. It activates our own fears, our own memories of suffering, our own sense of helplessness, and so we rush to fix, to solve, to save. Not because the other person needs saving, but because we need relief from our discomfort. But here's the thing about true compassion. It is willing to be uncomfortable. It is willing to bear witness to suffering without immediately trying to fix it. It is willing to be present with pain without demanding that it stop for our sake. I once counseled someone who came to me in deep grief over the loss of a loved one. Friends and family had tried everything to cheer them up, to distract them, to rush them through their grieving. They offered platitudes, forced optimism, constant activities, anything to avoid the discomfort of simply being with someone in genuine pain. What this person needed was not rescue from their grief, but accompaniment through it. Not someone to lift them out of the dark valley, but someone willing to walk beside them as they traversed it at their own pace. Someone brave enough to be present with their pain without trying to fix it. The third question is perhaps the most profound. What wisdom might their suffering be trying to reveal to them? What might they be learning that your intervention would prevent them from discovering? You see, suffering often contains messages we need to hear, lessons we need to learn, wisdom we need to integrate. When we rush to eliminate the suffering, we may also eliminate the very catalyst needed for someone's growth or awakening. Think about it. Have your greatest insights come during times of comfort and ease? Or have they emerged from grappling with difficulty, from navigating challenge, from enduring what you thought you could not bear? If you are like most humans, it is suffering that has been your greatest teacher. It is pain that has shaped you most profoundly. It is difficulty that has forged your deepest wisdom. Now, I'm not saying we should romanticize suffering or inflict it unnecessarily. That would be perverse. But perhaps we might approach it with more respect, more humility, more awareness of its potential role in human growth and transformation. Perhaps we might be more like skilled gardeners who understand both when to intervene and when to allow natural processes to unfold. The gardener does not try to open the bud before its time, does not try to speed the ripening of fruit, does not try to make the oak grow faster than its nature allows. The gardener creates conditions that support growth and then steps back, trusting the innate intelligence of life itself. You see, there is a profound paradox at the heart of wise compassion. Sometimes the most loving action is non-action. Sometimes the greatest gift we can offer is not intervention, but presence. Not solutions, but witnessing. Not saving, but accompanying. This requires a level of courage few of us have developed. The courage to be with suffering without trying to fix it. The courage to trust another's journey even when it passes through darkness. The courage to bear witness without rushing to rescue. Think about it. How different might your relationships be if you approached them with this kind of wisdom? If you could discern when to act and when to refrain from acting? If you could trust the unfolding of others' journeys even when they include pain? I suspect most of us carry an internal dialogue that goes something like this. If I see suffering and don't try to fix it, I am failing. I am being cold. I am being selfish. I am not a good person. But what if I told you that sometimes the most profound respect we can offer another human being is to trust their capacity to navigate their own suffering? To honor their autonomy even when it leads them through difficulty? To believe in their innate wisdom even when they seem lost? This is not easy. It goes against everything our helper culture has taught us. It contradicts our ego's need to be the savior, the fixer, the one with answers. It requires us to release control and embrace uncertainty, to acknowledge the limits of our understanding and the bounds of our responsibility. But here's the thing about true wisdom. It is humble. It recognizes that life is far too complex, too mysterious, too vast for our limited minds to comprehend fully. It acknowledges that what appears destructive in the moment may be constructive in the long view. That what seems like harm may be healing in disguise. That what looks like a detour may be the path itself. You see, bearing witness is a profound spiritual practice. To be fully present with another's suffering without trying to change it, fix it, or make it go away. To offer the gift of your attention, your compassion, your unwavering presence while allowing them their own journey. This is not passivity. This is not indifference. This is not cold detachment. It is the highest form of respect. It is the deepest kind of trust. It is a recognition of the sacred autonomy of each human soul. Think about it. Their suffering, like the butterfly's struggle, contains the very strengthening they need for flight. Who are we to interrupt this ancient, necessary process? Who are we to impose our timeline, our comfort level, our limited understanding on another's unfolding? Perhaps true compassion is not rushing to save others from their pain, but creating conditions in which they can discover their own capacity to transform it. Perhaps wise love is not shielding others from difficulty, but supporting them as they find their way through it. Perhaps the greatest gift we can offer is not rescue, but relationship. Not solutions, but solidarity. Not answers, but accompaniment. You see, when we stop trying to save people who, at some level, are not seeking to be saved from their suffering, we open the possibility for something much more profound than rescue. We create space for authentic connection, for mutual growth, for shared humanity. What if I told you that your noble attempts to rescue others might be the very thing keeping them trapped? That sometimes the wisest, most compassionate action is to step back and allow others their chosen journey, however painful it appears to you. But here's the thing I want you to remember. This stepping back is not abandonment. It is not indifference. It is not washing your hands of others' pain. It is a conscious, compassionate choice to honor the mystery of another's journey, to trust the wisdom that lies within them, even when it is obscured by suffering, to believe in their capacity to find their way, even through the darkest night.